As you all stand atop the city walls, you can just make out on the horizon a large, gleaming metal form marching in your direction. The previous attempts to slow this construct down lay in ruins in its wake, and it looks like it'll reach the city by the day's end. Reports from citizens that have gone out to try and do something about it are coming in, and they're saying it shows no signs of slowing. What would you all like to do? Hello, and welcome to Tuna's Tales. This time on Pondering Monsters, we'll be covering the Iron Golem. This creature is a CR16 construct with a whole collection of different immunities and resistances that'll make it tough for your standard 5th level party to put a single scratch on it. So just how might a low-level group deal with this type of threat? Well, for that you'll have to stick around as we start taking a look into constructing this encounter. This encounter starts off fairly straightforward, with the party in a city where they start hearing alarms go off. Shortly after the alarms start, news of a large metal man that's marching towards the city start coming in. This is the Iron Golem for this encounter. It's making its way across the landscape and is on a collision course with the city. Some people have gone out to try and stop it already, but initial reports from those attempts are that nothing has worked and their weapons don't seem to have any effect on it. Luckily, the golem doesn't seem interested in attacking people as long as they don't attack it. Bad news, though, is that it plowed right through anything they put up to try and slow it down, and it'll probably do the same to the city walls. Whether it's officially asked of them or not, people start looking towards the party to see if they can do anything about this. At the very least, people in the city are hoping that they'll try, because if they don't, then the city is sure to be destroyed. But can your party stand up to a creature that's roughly a 3 times deadly encounter for them? I say yes, but not in the way that they may be thinking. This is a type of encounter I like to call a puzzle combat. Sure, they'll get into initiative with this creature, and it may try to attack them, but if they keep their wits about them and try to think outside the box, they may just find something that could make this whole encounter easier for them. All that being said, the summary has been summarized, so let's start looking at the potential questions that we have to deal with before running this at our tables. Now, I know some people may see a CR16 creature and think, I can't put that against my party. It's too strong. There has to be a better way. But I'm here to tell you that that's just not the case. I started doing Pondering Monsters because I wanted to show people new to D&D that there's really no reason a particular monster can't be used for whatever you want, and this is a prime example of that. You just have to be prepared when doing something like this, and that usually means digging into the encounter to see what issues there might be, and figuring out how to move them around or make them work. So let's do just that. For our big questions here, we have, why would the party help with this if they aren't hired for it? How long does the party have to fix this? Where did the golem come from, or who sent it? And how can they stop a rampaging Iron Golem without fighting it? So, now that we know those, let's start checking them off, starting with none other than... Why would the party help with this if they aren't hired for it? This question may feel a little obvious since the answer should be because they're the heroes and that's what they do. But depending on several different things, you may have characters that look at this challenge and say something like, this is a death wish, I'm not risking my life for this town, which is a reasonable response if you have a character grounded in reality. So, to motivate these grounded characters, take this threat and put it in front of the party's home base, a town that they've been repeatedly coming back to, or a town that they know people in. Something like that. They're probably going to want to protect that place more than a town that they just rolled into. All that being said, you can of course offer to pay the party some gold for it. Given that the city is likely to be destroyed if they choose not to help, a large sum of coin seems reasonable here. I'm thinking 5,000 gold, but feel free to adjust that as you see fit. I personally used it as an opportunity to give my PCs a house in the city. How long does the party have to fix this? This answer is dependent on how quickly you want your party to act and how much prep time you want them to have. If you want them to act quickly and not have a lot of prep time, then the answer is a couple of hours before the golem is at the gates. If you want to draw this out, then as much as a week. The benefits of a longer time here means that the party is free to try several options before things get dire, while a shorter time means they have to act fast to protect everyone. Where did this golem come from, or who sent it? This is a question that you get to have some fun with. Do you have a villain that you want to introduce to your party? Some ancient ruins that this thing crawled out of that you want the party to go and explore? Or is this just a portent of the times to come? You can use this as a hook to lots of bigger events in your world, because I don't think there's a table out there where, if you put this in front of them, they would deal with it and then not be curious about the cause of it at all. Especially if you describe the golem as coming to a rest just outside the city. Every time the party comes or goes, they'll be looking at that giant metal husk they dealt with that one time, and someone's bound to get curious. Finally, how can they stop a rampaging Iron Golem without fighting it? This is the meaty question that we have to deal with, as, in answering it, we'll be detailing the skill challenge that is necessary to run this encounter at lower levels. That's right, it's skill challenge time. And to kick things off, what if we say that this golem has an opening at the nape of its neck that's just large enough for a small creature to squeeze inside? The internal space can hold 2 small creatures at most, and once inside, they can start taking this thing apart while the rest of the party runs distractions on the outside. To be clear here, a medium creature would not be able to fit. The opening is just big enough that a small creature could use the squeezing rules on page 192 of the player's handbook to make their way inside. Once inside, there is enough space for 2 creatures to move around as if it was difficult terrain. Pretty straightforward on paper, but it does raise some questions of its own, like how does the party know they need to get inside the golem in the first place? For that, you can have them research something at the city's local library, bookstore, or college if those exist in your world. If not, then you can have an NPC who was with an earlier scouting group report to the party about a potential way to get inside the golem, but it looks pretty tiny and normal-sized creatures won't be able to fit. Aha, but what if there's no one in the party small enough, I hear you saying? Well, I have 2 suggestions for that. Give the party a scroll of Enlarge Reduce prior to this encounter, or have someone in the city have access to one and be willing to offer it up for this. Option 2 would be to have a magical effect on the entrance to the golem that shrinks a creature down upon entering. Now, a medium creature can enter the golem and, in doing so, becomes a creature of the appropriate size category until they leave it. Once inside, however, it's not as simple as just attacking it, as the immunities and all that still apply from the inside. No, what they have to do is slightly different here. Welcome to Internal Golem Anatomy 101. In all honesty, I didn't use any lore-specific information regarding the internal workings of golems here. I just came up with some stuff that seemed like it'd be fun for my players to deal with, and that sounded like it could make sense. Inside the golem are 7 magical glyphs that provide the power it needs to keep moving. 1 for the head, and 2 each for the arms, legs, and front and back of torso. Out of those 7, it needs 4 glyphs to keep running, 2 each for the arms and legs. This means that if the party destroys 4 out of the 7 glyphs, then the golem comes down, as the 3 remaining ones aren't enough to keep it all together. So, how does one destroy a glyph? Easy. Give it some stats. We can say that a single glyph has an AC of 16, 1 hit point, and a successful attack dispels the glyph. If brute force isn't preferred though, then an Arcana check of DC 16 could be used to find the spot that needs to be destroyed in order to dispel it. But then a turn is spent looking for how to destroy it, unless you decide to be nice to your players and say that destroying it would be part of the check. And if those 2 options still aren't enough, then a Dispel magic cast at 6th level can do the same thing. Once whoever's gone inside has dispelled enough glyphs, the golem comes to a halt and the party is successful. If you're still here after all that, thanks, because with that out of the way, we can start tying this together. As you all ride up on the walking mass of humanoid-shaped metal, it doesn't seem to pay you any attention. You get out your ropes and your climbing hooks and throw them up onto the golem, providing you a way to climb up. As you begin your ascent, roll initiative. Before continuing, let's take a second to talk about the Iron Golem's stats here. Specifically, its damage immunities to fire, poison, psychic, and non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-adamantine weapons. This means, unless your party all have adamantine or magical weapons, they won't be able to hurt it. Now, I can hear some of you saying, what about spells? Well, the Iron Golem is mostly good with that too. It has the magic resistance trait, which gives it advantage on magical saves. Oh, and that fire immunity I mentioned before? Yeah, fire actually heals it. Putting all that together means this golem is virtually impossible to beat at lower levels in the traditional methods. Creature stats aside, let's assume that the party has taken the job and has set out to meet up with this golem. Upon reaching it, the reports they've heard from other people that have tried to stop it seem true. The golem doesn't aggro on them unless they attack it, there doesn't seem to be a scratch on it, and there are some hastily built defenses that have been destroyed in its wake. The party knows about the entrance and needs to get to it somehow. A creature could attempt to climb the golem easily enough by making a DC 12 athletics check with no rope, or you could give them advantage on the check if they use a rope. Once they get to the top, they can access the golem's internals and start with the skill challenge I outlined back in question 4. Once they're successful, the golem comes to a halt and the party has saved the city. Again, it's all pretty straightforward once you know how the skill challenge is supposed to run. The character working on that makes their checks, and eventually the golem comes down. But, as if things weren't hard enough with this, how can we make this harder if we wanted to? When it comes to scaling, we don't really need to touch the creature's stat block, as fighting the golem directly isn't the main focus here. We could do that for higher level parties that may want to fight the golem, which would be an option for them. A higher level party is just going to be better equipped to deal with this big of a threat. For the lower level parties though, you can up the DC on any of the skill checks needed, or make it harder to get into the golem by requiring that the characters outside make it move in a certain way to make the access point become visible. Kind of like opening a weak spot on a boss in a video game. Additionally, you can add some time crunch to the person inside the golem too. This is a machine. It's got moving parts, superheated areas, and magical energy that's probably unshielded. It's not out of the realm of reason to say that you just had a character stick their hand into basically a running car engine. So, for this, I created 3 effects: Moving Metal, Extreme Heat, and Arcane Burst. To use them, roll a d6 at the top of every round. A 1 or a 2 gets one effect, a 3 or a 4 gets another effect, and the last one triggers on a 5 or a 6. If you want to throw a bigger wrench into that, then roll a d4 as well. On a 4, all 3 effects trigger at the same time. As for what the effects do, we have Moving Metal. As the metal construct travels across the land, metal bars, plates, and gears shift and move inside of it. To avoid being caught in these contraptions, either athletics or acrobatics needs to be used to push back or dodge the metal in the small space. Make a skill check with a DC of 14, taking no damage on a success or 1d10 magical bludgeoning damage on a failure. Extreme Heat. While mostly powered by magic, there is a small steam generator placed within the construct to help take some of the strain off of the magical glyphs that power it. This also works as a form of heat sink, as that much moving metal can generate a lot of friction and the heat needs to go somewhere. However, to someone inside the golem, the danger of steam bursts or superheated metal is real. Make a DC 14 con save, taking no damage on a success or 1d10 fire damage on a failure. And Electrical Burst. As a means of providing finer movement control, these golems have several arcane glyphs. These help power it, protect it, and keep it operating until destroyed. A drawback to this is that there is a considerable amount of arcane energy that gets built up inside every so often and gets automatically dumped. While the construct is grounded, anyone inside it is not. Make a DC 14 dex save, taking no damage on a success or 1d10 lightning damage on a failure. Adding these to the encounter means that whoever gets inside the golem can't just stay there forever. They need to keep making checks and passing them before they become non-operational themselves. And with that, you should now have an idea of how to scare your players by throwing a creature at them that they can't handle in the slightest. From a traditional sense. I've done a very simple write-up for this encounter, and as usual, you can find it on my Patreon linked in the description. Included in the write-up are some tips for running the skill challenge, dealing with the traps inside the golem, and an NPC that you can use for exposition if you need it as well, but otherwise, things should be pretty simple with this encounter. As always though, if you have any questions about this, want to tell me how it went at your table, or just want to suggest a monster for me to cover next, then leave it in the comments below. If you liked the idea behind this encounter, then leave a like, and if you're looking forward to what the next encounter I come up with is, then subscribe and do that thing with the bell so you can get notified when it goes up. Thanks for letting me talk at you all, and until next time, keep pondering.